Scream Factory has recently dropped a new 4K UHD release of the 1986 slasher horror film Sorority House Massacre, and this is a new collector's edition. And if you buy it directly from their site, depending on availability, you might be able to get this limited edition poster as well. In this video, I'm going to dive into this new 4K transfer. We're going to briefly talk about the audio. I'm going to discuss the plot a little bit and share my thoughts on that, and whether you need to add this to your slasher movie collection. And I'm going to take a closer look eventually at the physical packaging, and finally I'm going to rate it on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And I may throw in some other stuff while I'm talking as well. And if you do me a favor and go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins, Watkins Films. Now, this is my first time watching the movie. I thought I had a copy of this, another Blu-ray copy, but it turns out what I did have was a film called The House on Sorority Road. No, not Road, Row. The House on Sorority Row. Now, this is an MVD release, and I still haven't watched this yet. I'm eventually going to watch it, but it does look like that film looks like it may have had a higher budget than this one. This is a fairly low-budget film. It was put out by Roger Corman's company, New Concord. And I think it was shot in a really short period of time, but we're gonna talk more about that here in just a bit. But as far as this transfer of this film has been given a brand new scan from the original camera negative, and it has a scan on. There's two discs. There's a Blu-ray and a 4K, and both of them have that same scan on it. Though the 4K has a lot better quality. The 4K also has HDR, but there is quite a large uptick in quality between the 4K and the Blu-ray. Now, while watching the film, I wasn't immediately entranced by the transfer. I think the biggest thing while you're watching it now, some of the shots do have some depth to them, but some of them are a little flat, especially some of the earlier shots in the film. Right away, you see some of the shots are just kind of like flat shots, and a lot of times where you got some close-ups of people, there's not like a lot of detail. You don't see a lot of detail in their face. There's not like very much sharpness or clarity in a lot of the close-up shots. It almost seems it's not quite out of focus, but there's just not quite a detail there. And I think this comes from the source, and it's not from the 4K transfer. But the source, I believe, just looked that way to begin with. And both the 4K and the Blu-ray look this way. It may, with additional, I guess with the enhanced quality of the 4K, it might be more noticeable. Some of the shots are just, they're not very sharp. Especially some of the close-ups are worse than others. But occasionally you will see a close-up of something or someone that has more texture or more detail on the faces or whatever object that they're focusing on. The black levels look really nice. They are throughout. There's not any black crush that I saw. It all looks fairly. Especially on the 4K, the shadow depth is really nice, and some of the stuff later on in the film, they have some different types of lighting. At one point, the lights go out, and it's candle lit, so you have more of an orange sort of glow going on. And then at some points, when they go into other rooms of the house where there's not candle lit, it's some more blue, and a lot of the like on a teal color on the outside, and then when they go out, it is more bluish, and they go outside, it's like lit moonlight, I assume, and it looks more blue. And I do like some of those scenes. They look pretty cinematic, more cinematic than some of the other of the film. Now, because it was such a quick shoot, they didn't have a lot of time to do a lot of really interesting shots, but they tried to as it goes on. The grain. Now the film there is some pretty heavy film grain, which is noticeable in both the 4K and the Blu-ray. It is more noticeable in the Blu-ray, but the 4K looks a lot better. Even though I was looking over the Blu-ray, the grain was very distracting to me. It is there in the 4K, but I guess the higher quality of it looks a little more clean. But there's a fairly substantial amount of grain, and it hasn't been cleaned up, which is a good thing because in theory it should leave more detail, but the detail here isn't all that clear. Sorority House Massacre is technically a spin-off from the series Slumber Party Massacre. Now, Slumber Party Massacre Part 1 and Part 2, as you can see, have a 4K release. This is also from Scream Factory, and this is pretty well done. I recently did a podcast on Conversations in Horror about the Slumber Party Massacre, and you can check that out. I'm going to put a link below. You can check out this. It's an audio podcast that I joined in on this Conversations in Horror, and we talk about the Slumber Party Massacre in quite some length. I prefer the Slumber Party Massacre over this. I think it's a better film. But this has some positive aspects as well. Now, the Sorority House Massacre, there are 3 of them, but the other 2. I guess before I should talk about that, I should say that the Slumber Party Massacre films, they all had female directors for these horror films, and the very first Sorority House Massacre film also did. So they were trying to follow suit with that, having female directors. But the Sorority House Massacre 2 was actually directed by a male director, and it wasn't originally even supposed to be Sorority House Massacre 2. He shot another film, and then they ended up retitling it to go along with this. So I thought it was a pretty cool idea to have women specifically directing these films. It is a little disappointing that with the second one they didn't continue that trend. But I haven't seen the second one, so it may be interesting. I haven't watched it yet. There is also another part of this spinoff called Cheerleader Massacre that I also haven't seen, but they only did 2 of them. These other ones, they did 3 of them. So as far as the plot, now on the plot of the film, it is kind of similar to a lot of other films. This is an 86 slasher, so slasher's been going for a while, but of course it's going to be similar to Halloween, but this one does incorporate some dream sequences, similar or not as good as Nightmare on Elm Street. But there are some dream sequences in this film, nothing too crazy, but some of them are kind of effective. The main character here, Beth, she's checking out this new sorority house, and she's trying to decide whether she wants to join it, but she's staying there for the weekend. It is Memorial Day weekend, so most of the people aren't there, and so this is, I guess, technically a holiday film, Memorial Day. You know, and I can see a lot of Memorial Day films, but this one I guess is technically that, even though it doesn't really have too much about Memorial Day in it. But she's checking out this new sorority house, and the moment she walks in the door, something feels off. And when she walks in the door, suddenly this killer who's in a mental institution wakes up, and there's apparently a psychic link between her and this killer, and it kind of cuts back and forth between her and him doing stuff in the cell, and then things of that nature. So there's it's kind of exciting in a way that connection's there. It is somewhat fascinating that there's this connection between her and the killer, and there's a reason for it later. I'm not going to drop any major spoilers, but they try to do something a little bit different with the film in connection to the main character and the killer. So I give them some props for that. And the actress here, Angela O'Neill, does a pretty good job doing this character. I like what she does. And really, all the acting, especially between most of the female main characters, is handled pretty good, and they have some subtle performances. Now, Angela O'Neill's given more to do than the others because she's got this kind of weird thing going on, because she's got seeing things with this killer, and she's seeing like this sorority house the killer had previously killed people in it when it wasn't even a sorority house at the time. So it's kind of a creepy connection as she's feeling these deaths in the house. And so her friends become concerned about it, and they even try different things like hypnosis eventually and things of that nature. But it's I mean, some of that's a little goofy. I do like Angela's performance here, and she does a good job trying to relay these emotions and dealing with these things. And her aunt has recently died, so she's had this trauma, and so she's trying to just keep her mind off of that. But then there's all this kind of weird stuff starting to happen. The actress didn't do a lot of other films. She was in the film Alien Nation from 1988, the one with James Caan in it, that they later made a TV series about. She has a small part in that. She went on to do prop designs, and she's been actually working on a lot of pretty well-known movies. Like, for instance, the recent Barbie movie, she was a prop master, I believe, on that film. So she's still been working in the industry. It's apparently, hopefully, killing it. I'm sure she is if she's continuing to work. So for a Roger Corman type of film in this time period, they were required to throw in some nudity and some sex. They didn't get there's not a lot of it in here, but there's a very random scene with the women have to one of their friends is out of town, one of the roommates, and they decide to go try on her clothes, and so the girls are taking off all their clothes. Well, they really don't have all their clothes off. One of them you can see her boobs pretty good, and the other ones you can kind of see them. And with the main character sits on the bed and watches them. Apparently the actress didn't want to do the nude scene and was going to walk off the project. But it would be kind of, even like, it actually works her not participating, because she's kind of an outsider, and then these women just are all of a sudden going to try on the roommate's clothes, which is kind of weird that they do it anyway. It's really kind of dumb, but I guess they needed to get that nudity in there. Later on, they get a little bit more nudity in there. They have this brief sex scene inside of a teepee. Like there's some guys that come up, and then he brings one of the girls out there, and that's when the slasher, the real part of the slasher film starts, and that's about 20 minutes before the end. That's when the killer he's there already, but that's when he kills them in the tent, and then after that it's like on until the end of the film. Now this killer has a knife, kind of like a big Bowie knife, and that's like really the only weapon that he uses to kill people with. Now that is a little, I guess it could be a little mundane for people who are looking for some inventive kills. There's not really any inventive kills, but it is unsettling what happens, even with the one weapon that he's got, this knife, and it's, you know, just plunging that into someone's chest, and there's not like a lot of blood or gore, which I think in some ways might help the film. It makes it more creepy, but when it gets into the later part of the film and the killing really starts to happen, it is quite, I don't know, it is quite creepy at that part. There's definitely a part in it while I was watching it where I was like, okay, this is kind of scary what's going on here. So it can lean towards that way, even though it does seem a little formulaic what's happening, but there is a bit of a dread thing going on there. Now, a lot of the first half of the film before it gets underway, it involves this back and forth to her weird dreams and the killer eventually escaping. Nothing we've seen these sort of things before, but I think in general, though, even though we have seen them before, it is all done fairly good. For a little while earlier on, when it's kind of following the killer around, not showing him too good, it's kind of doing these like kind of almost Steadicam like shots following him around, and there's a pretty cool part where you see the Steadicam shot coming up to the girls who are outside. They're messing with the TPs out during the day. It's coming walking up, and then they turn around and it's not the killer. It's like their boyfriend showing up. And the guys here are pretty goofy in general. It's like, and one of the guys actually isn't goofy, but that's the only guy that's like, hey, I gotta go. I want to go do something else. I think he says he's gonna go rafting or something, which is pretty hilarious. And he's just like, I'm out. And then so one of the girls doesn't have a guy there with her, but there's these three kind of goofy guys and that they're hanging out with. But there's also something interesting. When the lights go out, there's no power. And at one point, and I'm pretty sure this happens, even though it's kind of done really oddly, at one point they're like, let's go check out the tube. And then it shows them sitting in front of what looks like it's probably a TV for a moment. It's like what the TV works with the lights out. It's actually hilarious that happens that way. I don't know. But anyway, and it doesn't show what's on the screen or anything, but it looks like they're sitting at the TV, and I don't know what they were thinking with that. Maybe they just thought nobody would notice. But here, let's take a quick peek at this packaging. So it does have a slip cover on the inside. Here's the same as on the inside as on the outside. Here's the back. Now this is part of that dream sequence. There's like these three girls who don't have any eyes. That's one of the creepier parts. On the inside, we have two discs. We have a 4K and a Blu-ray. That's about it for the packaging, other than this poster. Now, there are some nice special features on here. It is presented in Dolby Vision, and there is HDR. And the HDR actually, if you compare the Blu-ray to the 4K, the HDR does bring out the colors and make everything look more lifelike. It typically does. That's probably the main thing that the 4K has over the Blu-ray, as far as that's why it looks so much better. There's some interviews. There's an interview with the main actress on here. There's several interviews. There's also an extended UK VHS cut with additional footage. Now, there's a very short film, about an hour and 14 minutes. There's an interview with Roger Corman, and so all these are archived. The only thing, and there's some other interviews too, but really anything except the only thing new to this, there's a previous release on Blu-ray. The only thing new to this is the 4K scan, and there's a new on the Blu-ray. It says The Final Girl: A Guide to Surviving Slasher Films. All right, so let's go ahead and rate this film. I'm going to rate it again on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. And this is a tough one. I'm going to give it about 2.5 stars, leaning towards a 3. Now, I thought it was fairly solid for a slasher film, and I would, if you collect slasher films, I would add it to your collection. It's better than a lot of them I've seen. Again, it's not as good as some of the other ones, but it did have a sense of tension going on with it, and it did feel somewhat realistic, especially in the later part of it. I thought it was well directed. And as far as what Scream Factory's released here, I'm going to give them a 3.5 star rating. I thought they did a good job here as far as the transfer, even though I think they can't help what the source material is. I think the transfer is an upgrade from the Blu-ray, and the HDR helps a lot. And if you would do me a favor and go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. You can check out some of my other videos. I've been doing a lot of other reviews of different types of films. But if you'd go ahead and like this video, subscribe to my channel. I'm Dave Watkins. Thanks for watching.